Hello there, everyone, and welcome once again to our wonderful pod where pop culture meets PR. On this episode, listeners, social media, that modern of all phenomenon growing all the time. Well, Jackie and I were speaking before we went live on this episode of the podcast, and there is an element of intrigue amongst both of us. And I'm sure you, our brilliant listeners, will share in that about the impact that social media and some of the main players in the social media space, the main influencers in the social media space, are having on a number of mainstream news stories and on the court of public opinion, a court that we discuss so much here on the podcast, and how then the court of public opinion are then informed when we attend an actual court, because there are some really, really important legal proceedings ongoing and about to come up as well in some of the stories we've been discussing on the podcast. Now, a quick disclaimer, a legal disclaimer, if you will. I am currently battling, not myself, but my household are battling a case of strep throats and bad voices. And the wonderful Jackie is so busy, the brilliant Jackie is so busy hosting here, there, and everywhere that Jackie's also somewhat struggling with her voice. But we are going to muddle through to bring you this content, listeners, because we're very passionate about it. Jackie, hello.
Hello.
Thoughts then on social media at large and the impact that social media and these really, really popular influencers on social media are having on the court of public opinion, because we're seeing it more and more, aren't we? Especially
Well,
with
it's not really on the court of public opinion. It's on court cases.
Court cases. Yeah, bang on. Yeah.
And it's like, it's that parallel between the importance of the court of public opinion versus the outcomes of court cases. And I think this really came crushing into view under the spotlight with the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case, because what's actually happened is that the communications of influencers and campaigns has actually become, and it's boiled down to, the central tenet of this whole court case. What started off as a sexual harassment allegations has been sort of whittled away through various different hearings with Judge Lyman in New York. And now all that is left is the case of retaliation, aiding and abetting retaliation, and then a breach of contract. So, in fact, the retaliation was conducted, or allegedly conducted, I should say, over social media, over influencer channels like TikTok and Insta and Snapchat and YouTube. And so that's when you're actually starting to see how important all of these influencers are. And in fact, with Baldoni and Lively, they're actually arguing over which influencers can be brought in as evidence right now for the court case that's coming up on the 18th of May. So you might recall there's that viral video that went around with Kirsty Floor. Kirsty. I think everybody calls her Kirsty, but I think her name is Kirsty Floor. And she's got this great podcast called The Flawsome Report. And she was a Hollywood interviewer. She's interviewed all the major Hollywood stars. And she did an interview, a very famous interview now, where she congratulated Blake Lively on her little bump because Blake Lively was pregnant and Blake Lively just retaliated, congratulations on your little bump. And, it was really a bit mean girl. But the meanest stuff that Blake Lively did after that was that Kirsty tried to move on and ask about the costumes in this particular film. And then Blake Lively meanly talked about the fact that why do they always talk about women's costumes? Why shouldn't they talk about men's costumes? And it was just a really mean interview. And it was brought back into the public domain when all of this Baldoni and Lively enmity came to light. Kirsty Floor was actually subpoenaed by Blake Lively's team to show all of her emails and everything else to show that Baldoni might have influenced her, might have asked her to release this video, among 100 other content producers and influencers. So this trial is really showing the impact of social media. And what you and I have been talking about has been how, up until now, Baldoni is the one who has been really winning in the court of public opinion. Ultimately, whatever comes at the end of this court case, they've both lost out because there's been so much dirt shipped about each different side and then amplified over all of these social media channels. I mean, you look at what Blake Lively herself was putting out over Instagram not a couple of weeks ago, which we talked about on the podcast. So for me, I started thinking about where all these influencers, where all these channels of influence are also showing up and starting to make an impact on proper court cases, real life court cases. And it's phenomenal. It's really striking and quite worrying. And I think I said to you before we came on air, Lyle, that it's almost feeling a bit Hunger Gamesy. It's quite a sort of dystopian
You
world
said
we're
this,
coming
didn't you?
into.
Yeah, you did say, and the analogy actually really stuck with me when you said it, and I'm really pleased you brought it in now they're actually on air. This idea that, and actually, I mean, the reason the Hunger Games is a great analogy is the moments in that fictional story don't have a shelf life of seconds. They have a shelf life that lasts the extent of the particular competition they're part of. And what I mean by that is, gone are the days in the real world, not the Hunger Games world now. We're actually in the real world. All right. Gone are the days where something happened and at best, or if that's even the way you look at it, it's then revisited further down the line when there's a new development, and that's in the written press or that's in broadcast press, be that TV, be that radio. But there's like a kind of there's almost this kind of like shift. We move on. There's like this vacuum of like information, and that might be a bit of a sweeping generalization, but quite often something really horrible happens, something really significant happens, it's reported on in traditional press, it's communicated traditionally, and then we move. These situations now have these extraordinary shelf lives. I mean, I'm reminded of, and I didn't expect to bring this in, but I'm reminded of Depp Heard, right? Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, this court case that captivated not just the nation in America, but captivated the entire world. My wife was obsessed with it. Friends of mine were obsessed with it. I'm still seeing reels on social media reminiscing about that court case. Like that was yonks ago. Like social media means that actual court proceedings, actual legal proceedings have a shelf life far beyond what they used to. Does that mean you have to? We can't really speak necessarily 100% to the legal side because neither of us are in the legal profession, but does that change how you have to approach, how you have to plan going into these proceedings? Because now it's becoming, this isn't just, some people are having a bit of a laugh and doing some analysis about this on social media. Stuff's happening. Analysis is happening. Predictions are being made. Investigations are happening on social media. Every team going into a court case surely has to take into account, if they're worth anything, if they're worth the money they're being paid, they have to take these things into account, surely.
Well, they do. And the truth of the matter is that influence is being professionalized. You have your PR firms and your crisis consultants, and then you have your legal strategists all working together to bring the narrative out. And we're starting to see the lawyers become media stars now. I mean, that's not a new thing. If you remember Johnny Cochran from the famous O.J. Simpson media case, and you've got people like Gloria Aldred, who has been talking a lot in the media about Epstein. But these lawyers, this is interesting, these lawyers are all US-based lawyers. And I think that they're becoming sort of media superstars because of the televising of the court cases. And that's another thing. I mean, the legal spectacle is being monetized. It's entertainment now. And you look at the number of true crime podcasts that have sprung up, but it seems to me to be really front and center in the US, where court cases are televised. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the social media channels having the most influence. And when I started looking into it, and you mentioned Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, that case was really affected by the allegations that there were media bots social media bots crawling around and creating tweets. And there were these polls that were saying, you had Amber Heard had 5 million in favor of her and Johnny Depp had 20 million in favor of him, or whatever it was. But it was all talking about influence, and it was all making the public sway. And that's what propaganda is, isn't it, at the end of the day? And we're always accused in PR of being spin doctors. And I always say we are truth doctors. We work with the truth. It's the publicists and increasingly the social media farms that are doing the spinning.
Hold it right there, listeners. We just wanted to take this opportunity to say that Jackie and I absolutely love recording this content for you. So please do like, subscribe, follow us wherever it is that you get your podcast. It really does mean the world to us. You keep the podcast going. And please do head over to our Substack as well. Search Where Pop Culture Meets PR. Subscribe. It's free. Get those comments in. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of this episode. And actually, it's really interesting you bring up what a lot of people's impressions of the PR landscape are. We'll bring in case studies we already have, obviously Amber Heard, Johnny Depp. We've spoken about Baldoni and Blake Lively. That's front and center because that's in a few weeks' time. But actually, from your own personal experience as a PR person recently, PR professional recently, if anything, people's impressions of PR going out there and finding influencers and doing that sort of thing may well be part of the overall landscape. But we've had experience of seeing things on social media to do with projects we've worked on and having to PR the response to that. A lot of people think that we're the instigators of these things. And yes, of course, but actually a lot of it is, and we spoke about this before we went live, you're a PR team working in tandem with a legal team ahead of a court case. You see something on social media. Red flag, red flag, red flag. That's something that's potentially going to get used. That's going to be seen. How do we communicate this? How do we strategize around this? That's such a new, well, not new, obviously, but it is relatively, it's a relatively new part of the job, isn't it? A relatively new part of how you form strategy. I mean, we spoke before about how PR teams will be factoring this in when it comes to Baldoni and Lively in a few weeks. Are there any that you've got your eye on that are going on currently where this is front and center? This is something that's really making its way into a real life legal case study.
Yes, I do. As you know, I'm slightly obsessed with Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk and the effect that some of the influencers are having on the ongoing court case of the alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson. It's alleged that he was responsible for the passing away of Charlie Kirk, and Candace Owens and a number of other podcasters are really doing deep dives, big sleuthing investigations, finding eyewitnesses, finding evidence, piecing timelines together. It's playing out as the pretrial hearings are going on right now, to the extent that within the pretrial hearing, Candace Owens was mentioned by name in that court about her theories about Israel being involved potentially in his demise. Now, this is significant because she's on the search for evidence that can be used. And if you listen to her podcast, she says, I hope that Tyler Robinson's team are listening to this podcast because I have this evidence for you. You should be taking this and dealing with this. Equally, she is looking at what's going on in the court, in the pretrial hearing, commentating on the fact that, for example, Tyler Robinson's defense lawyers are not being given access to crucial evidence that the prosecution says that they have but will not produce it. And she's saying this is all very, all very shonky. And the things like the very fact that Erica Kirk has asked for a speedy trial, whereas usually that is the defendant asking for the speedy trial because they don't want to be locked up while they're waiting for trials, or they don't want this to go on when they're innocent. But in this case, it's sort of very back to front. Erica Kirk's asking for a speedy trial. And Candice is saying this could be because they're not being given enough time to produce their defense. So all these things are going on. Now, when you look at a trial like that, that is so public, that is so much in the news, how on earth are you going to find jurors, who are going to be not influenced by all the back and forth that's going on? And nowadays, when you've got these, and all of this pre-trial stuff is all being played in front of the cameras. Everybody's there to see it and analyze it. And this is where it's quite interesting to see the monetization of this as a legal spectacle. This is becoming entertainment. And the podcasters and the YouTubers and the influencers on Instagram and TikTok, they're equally producing commentary that is entertainment. So are we.
This is it. Well, we certainly hope so. We certainly hope so. We certainly hope it's entertaining. We find it very entertaining to creators. But actually, I mean, I think you're hitting on something really, really significant and really powerful here. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Instagram and things like Bebo and MySpace first, sort of hit the mainstream, and they were purely photo sharing. I mean, it's almost as if the word social media didn't even really exist. They were purely photo sharing platforms. This was it. It was like an online gallery. This is what I'm up to. And it sort of grew in this Leviathan, this space. It just had an extraordinary growth ever since those things started to come to fruition, come to the mainstream. And actually now, it's impossible to not involve social media within pretty much everything. And some people might lament that. Some people might even disagree with the fact that I've said that and been so sweeping. But now, when criminal investigations take place, even before things go to court, when police are investigating something, certainly over here in the United Kingdom, I'm sure over in the States and all over the world, let's take the phone away from suspects we have and let's investigate what they've been looking up on their social media. What have they been putting on their social media? What have they put on their stories? What have they been recording in the days and weeks building up to the crime allegedly taking place, the things taking place? Court proceedings then happen. I'd like to show you X, Y, and Z social media account, which tells its own story. And to your point, and this is a really big one, it's becoming impossible now to not find people who are influenced by these goings on. And that makes it just incredibly difficult, not just for the courts, who are obviously having to organise these proceedings, not just for the lawyers, obviously. And that might be why, that was what you were alluding to earlier, that might be why there has been this advent of the celebrity lawyer, the famous lawyer, because it's like, if you can't beat them, join them. Let's fight fire with fire. If there are memes being created about this case, let's find a really memeable lawyer. But PR teams must have an absolute nightmare here. Like, hey, well, who are the jurors? They absolutely know what's been going on. Bots have had their way with Depp Heard. Candace Owens has been investigating Tyler Robinson and the Charlie Kirk situation. Sean Diddy Combs did it himself. He started putting his own things on social media ahead
Well,
of court
you remember
cases.
that famous scene from the documentary, the Netflix documentary, where he was screaming at his lawyers saying, we've got to get out there. We've got to get ahead of this. We've got to get on social media.
Using social media. Extraordinary. I mean, there must be famous lawyers from yesteryear, scratching their heads, turning in their graves, going, what, using social media to get out there ahead of a court case? But it is true, isn't it? It's becoming such a powerful tool, isn't it?
It is. So you look at Brian Friedman, for example, and, he's becoming such a media superstar in his own right that you can be, or one could be influenced to think, he wouldn't defend a client so vociferously if they weren't guilty. But here's the interesting thing. It now is because of the televising, because of the impact of all the cases, it seems to me to be that there is a race to get ahead of the narrative first. Get out there first with your narrative and you stand the better chance of winning. And when we think about winning, we always think about the person who's right and the person who's wrong. And we all know that there are grey areas in life. No usual absolute truth, or what one person believes is true, somebody else might believe is a little bit true. It's very difficult to create absolutes out of most situations. And that's why sometimes when the gavel comes down and the decision is made, some people think this isn't fair, for whatever reason. But if you talk about racing ahead, trying to get the narrative, that's actually what Blake Lively did when the New York Post got a hold of the whole big article that they came out with. This was very much getting ahead with her narrative. And you could argue that it was Baldoni that did have to retaliate. He's being accused of retaliation, but she's accusing him of retaliating before that article. She's accusing him of retaliating to her sexual harassment allegations and getting people to see her in a bad light about her publicizing the film with florals and her booze brand and everything else. That's when she said his retaliation happened. So it all of the sort of the timeline and the order of all of these allegations and retaliations and everything else got quite muddled. So this big New York Post article was very much getting that narrative back. And I remember when we read it, and we're going back a couple of years now, Lyle, and we thought, wow, what a creep this guy is. We didn't know who Justin Baldoni was. And we just thought, that's terrible. All this 17 points that she'd put as her conditions for carrying on filming in his directorial environment. Oh my goodness, it must have been terrible that she had to give all these conditions. And through all of the court case, what's actually transpired through evidence that has been produced is very damning and damaging to Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and less so to Justin Baldoni, who could be accused of being a bit woo-woo and a bit, this Baha'i faith, and, he's very woke, and, some people would say that's insincere, and it's, but whatever it is, the court of public opinion is coming down on his side because they don't like the underdog. They don't like people to be bullied. And that's a narrative that has been coming out from the Baldoni camp. He has to stand up for himself. He's had everything taken away from him. This is a bullying narrative that they are putting out. And you and I have been observing this for quite a long time. And from being in that profession, seeing these things evolve, to me, it's fascinating how my profession now is becoming increasingly important. And I often say it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. And that is becoming increasingly important because we have these multiple channels that show us all, warts and all. You can hear Blake's voice on voice notes. You can see her on video. You can see her on a daily basis on her Instagram and what she's saying on her Instagram. Everything is very exposed, very transparent. And the more you give in this environment, the more you're going to be judged upon. And this is where we get frustrated because we often, this is another thing about PR people. Please listen to me here. It's that we often don't say anything, and that's strategic. We often counsel people not to do anything, to zip it, to not post on social media, to stay quiet. Things blow over often there's not. A knee-jerk reaction is often one to get out there and try to win your cause and try to broadcast your view, your point of view. And we see more things going wrong with that approach than we see going right. And now we have all of the social media being seen to influence court cases. So the temptation for those who are accused, or the temptation for those who are involved in the court cases, is that much more that they can state their case publicly and hopefully influence what's going to happen as an outcome.
Before you go any further, we would just like to tell you about a brand new podcast from the creative minds behind Where Pop Culture Meets PR. By fans and for fans, Pod Round discovers and curates the best episodes from across YouTube, Spotify, Substack, you name it, the whole pod landscape, and delivers the ones worth your time straight to you, serving up different genres, different voices from all corners of the globe. Pod Round is the one-stop shop for podcast lovers. That's Pod Round, available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of this episode. once again, I'm just glad you brought in sort of in defense. I mean, I sort of feel like titling that section in defense of PRs and in defense of communications professionals, because it does drive me a bit mad when people say, oh, they haven't said anything. Their PR must be terrible. Their PR team must be terrible. Small tangent here. And obviously our international listeners may not be across this as much as our UK listeners. But actually, the point I'm trying to make is the exact reason for that. The whole Scott Mills situation that we covered in an earlier episode of the podcast. He said one thing, he made one statement, and all we've heard of it since was today, and it was just who his replacement is. He said one thing, and then he kept stum, and we haven't heard anything else. And people will go, oh, but where's the PR? Where's the communication? Where's I think I was one of them, to be fair. Actually, I hold my hands up. Where's the transparency? Well, there you go. There you go, listeners.
In my
Strategically,
opinion,
they've got it bang on.
he's doing exactly the right thing.
Exactly.
And this is a case where he was accused of having inappropriate or having assaulted somebody who was younger and below the age of consent. And it was a very serious accusation was made against him many, many years ago. We're talking decades ago. And this has surfaced just recently that he was investigated for this. He wasn't charged. He wasn't found guilty. He didn't evidentially do anything wrong. Nothing has been proven against him. And yet, just the very sniff of scandal around him has meant that he's lost his job for something that happened decades ago, or may not have happened at all decades ago, because it's one man's word against another. And what he has done is absolutely 100% correct. By blowing on the flames, by fanning the flames, by giving it oxygen, he could have had that blow up and everybody debate it ad nauseum. What he's doing is he's letting it shut itself down. And these things are best left if you have nothing in court, if you've got no evidence against you. And I've seen people like Cliff Richard, for example, being accused. His house was raided on live television years ago.
Wow.
And he was accused of something and had his house raided, and he had done nothing wrong. This was on the basis of allegations against him. Nothing was proved to have been done wrong. And that's what you have to land with as a fair person. You say, find this person guilty, show the evidence, then punish them. Fine. But if it's just an allegation, I mean, Lyle, I could tell everybody you kicked my puppy, and people would think, oh, what a horrible man Lyle is. And I just said that. Yeah. And it's not true. Do you know what I mean? I haven't got a puppy either. But this is evidential of how bad things can get by just saying something about somebody. And nowadays, when we've got our young people growing up in an age of social media, in an age of Twitter, they're now being actually, and I'm seeing this, they're now being very much more circumspect. They don't want to be, my son won't let me take a picture of him. And even if he did, he would say, don't post it immediately. And I don't post pictures of him. And I wouldn't, because that's his right to ask about that. But all of his friends are exactly the same way, unless they are running their own channels like TikTok and stuff like that. But that's their choice. Or they know, they're quite cognizant of the fact that anything they do on social media could come up to bite them, because I'm telling them, their parents are telling them, be careful with what you say and do, because as we grow and evolve, we have different mindsets. I certainly have different political values than I held when I was 18. I won't say which ways I'm going. And at the moment, I'm more confused than ever when it comes to political values, as Felix, the producer, will tell you, because we had this big conversation the other night where I was saying, where do you think my political values lie? And he was like, well, I don't think you're green, but apart from that, I can't say.
There you go. And I think that's a good place to land, just generally, isn't it? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to go with you're not that. But then other than that, it's just like, it's the roll of a dice. And I think I'm there with you, because the world is confusing. And I mean, I think it's a good place to end this episode on as well, which is that actually, it's important to delineate here. There are a couple of case studies that we brought into this episode, the likes of Sean Diddy Combs, the likes of Tyler Robinson, and
we haven't even talked about Mangione. I mean, look at him. He's a rock star now. I mean, he's getting money sent to him in jail.
It's
he's
incredible, isn't it?
literally a rock star.
It's Mangione. I mean, it's Mangione Central at times, and the passing of Charlie Kirk, obviously, and Tyler Robinson's alleged involvement in that. These are instances, these are legal instances, legal case studies where justice will be served one way or another, we hope, by thorough investigation and appropriate legal proceedings. But we are looking, and we've also brought in Depp Heard. We have brought in Lively Baldoni. What makes social media so potentially, and I use potentially, specifically and importantly, what makes social media potentially important is also what makes social media potentially dangerous, because we get to a point now in these issues of settlements and settlement agreements and things. I was going to bring this in for you, Jackie. Baldoni brought a case against Lively, countersuit, thrown out. Lively brings something against Baldoni, 10 of 13 thrown out. It gets me thinking from the outside looking in just how important, and we even brought in the fact that, Lively's lawyers saying in the aftermath of these things being thrown out, we press ahead to testimony and we press ahead with the trial at pace and with, fervor in our hearts and blah, 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 right? And you made the excellent point. If they were worth their salt, they'd have known that 10 of these 13 would be thrown out for various legal technicalities anyway. We're getting to a point now where the social media is more the outcome of the social media situation. We've talked a lot about that in advance of court proceedings. The outcome when it comes to social media is also more important. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard will have teams who monitor how they're still being discussed on social media in the aftermath of that court case, and the reels I'm still getting on my algorithm, the things I'm still seeing on Instagram. The legal proceedings are almost becoming, and might be a bit provocative to some, and I mean it to be, but do please disagree with me in the comments. They're almost becoming secondary. Where is our social media strategy at? Where's our PR strategy ahead of these things? That's more important.
The thing to consider is the fact that we have been, as a society, coached into this expectation of speedy gratification of our information needs. And the fact is, with social media, with YouTube, with, all of the influencers, they can gratify our need for opinion and debate around a court case. And it's speedy. There's a critical speed mismatch between what's happening in the courts, which take their time, they're quite slow, and comparing that to the instant gratification that we get through observing debates and listening to opinion on a court case. That sort of feeds this whole kind of entertainment maelstrom. I don't think yet the court of public opinion has replaced our legal system and our court cases, but the messaging of complainants and people who are defending themselves has become so much more important, and how those people express themselves has become critical to the way they are judged and viewed. My question is, it's not whether it's happening now, but could it? And if it could, what should happen next? Because otherwise, I do fear that we're getting into the realms of that Hunger Games feeling and that's Colosseum type behavior of thumbs up and thumbs down. And that's a bit scary.
Listeners, what a turn of events. I'm not asking you the question at the end of episodes. You heard Jackie. What do you think? What next? I mean, this is actually, I'm so glad we got into this, because this is such a big topic. This is such a big area we love talking about case studies. We love talking about pop culture stories, and we love the PR analysis therein. But this is a seismic subject, and it's got relevance across a number of different case studies. And I really love them when we do episodes, we do get into these kind of broader terms, these broader themes. We love to know your views, listeners. You always do us proud in the comments, and we absolutely love reading your comments, good, bad, or indifferent as well. Agree, disagree with us. We love it. We just love the engagement. So please do leave those comments wherever you're getting your podcast, wherever you get this podcast, particularly on Substack. We would love to hear from you on our Substack. Search where pop culture meets PR. We'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us on the latest episode of our wonderful pod, Where Pop Culture Meets PR.
Thank you for sticking with it if you're listening to this croaky old voice.
Jackie and I are off to steam our voices and buy an absolute shed load of Strepsils. Other throat lozenges are available. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves. It's bye for now.